All right, great. Hey everybody, thanks for coming. This is when we started planning this event, I did not think we would have a room this full. This is fantastic. So I'm really excited about this. I think it shows hopefully some of the strides that we've made in the last 3-4 years introducing open source, I think, to the ag community, as well as just some of the things our group has been doing, putting out there, some of the things other open source projects around have been, like Ag Gateway, their Adapt project. It's just a great time to be in this space. And so I'm going to try to explain what I think the benefits of open source are for agriculture here. And the reason I'm going to try to explain that is that one of the missions of the center is going to be actually marketing open source to the ag industry as a whole, to growers, to packers, to co-ops and things like that, to try to help them understand what does this mean for you, because open source as a marketing tool is a huge win at the grassroots level. It's sort of your way of saying to your customers, I want to work with you, I want to be on a side of connection with you. So to get started, just to give you guys a little background, I don't know everybody here, so if you know a little bit about me, so you know where I'm coming from. I'm a farmer, that's my farm. I've got 3,000 head of beef cattle in those barns, and I got about 3,200 acres of corn, soybeans, and wheat over in that spot there. So that's my day job. I do that most of the time. They're home harvesting, trying to get the corn done before the rain today, but they're not quite going to make it. I'm a computer engineer, got my graduate degree at Purdue in electrical and computer engineering. And myself and Dennis and Jim started the OATS group at Purdue, which hopefully eventually becomes my one claim to fame that I'm really proud of. So we're going to start back in 1990. Of course, I thought this was cool. We could just stare at this all day. I've stared at this too long already. Back in 1990, or 1995, early 2000s, the vast majority of people looked at open source as this quaint little thing, but you can't make money doing it, right? I mean, how can you make money giving stuff away for free? It's just not going to work, especially if that's your core business. You're not giving it away for free, just a little bit of stuff so you can get people hooked and then they pay you a bunch of money. So that was the view in 1990. That's changed over the last 30 years to something that no one expected. I'm going to give you an example if this works. So I found this online. In the tech industry, that's part of where open source really started. And I found this online as sort of the vision of Microsoft at the time. Microsoft's vision was the same as the rest of us, that essentially, if you can get a web server for free, why the heck would you pay us, right? And so we as a company have to have initiatives to make sure we are hitting every single front in this war of trying to own as much of the software space as possible. That was the view. Everybody thought it made sense. Even the people in open source thought it made sense, but they did it anyways because they were having fun. But it turned out that Microsoft was wrong, and they were wrong for a long, long time, and it cost them a lot of great employees, it cost them a lot of market share, and it cost them a lot of marketing potential. To the point that now people put online pictures of Bill Gates with the Borg attached to the side of the plate. I mean, that was a big part of that message. And then I just Googled, Microsoft opensource.net now. They're a huge open source shop. They realized finally where is the value here. They just joined the open source initiative, the one that puts out all the licenses and things like that. They're a big corporate sponsor. They're sponsoring the Linux Foundation. They're in here in a big way. And it's because they couldn't ignore it anymore. And in ag right now, we're at the cusp of this, okay? We haven't yet figured out where is that business model? How is it that we can take that thing that worked in the tech industry and actually apply it to ag and somehow get some great successes here? So an example, academia version of the business model of failure here is data sharing. Do any of your companies actually use a whole lot of data from academic institutions in your daily business? I'm actually kind of curious. Anybody? 1, 2, couple, like 2, right? How much data has been collected by the academic institutions in ag for the last 100 years? A lot, right? And what happened with it? They wrote a paper, published it, and it went on some kid's laptop who doesn't go to school there anymore, and it's gone forever, right? And one of the reasons is in academia there is a culture that says, I'm not going to share my stuff because you're going to steal it. I want to publish the first paper. And I say, first of all, that's probably not going to happen. You're the one that knows it the best. And second of all, big deal. That means you took great data, right? That means you will be the basis for the work that everybody else does. That's supposed to be the academic model. That's why you publish the paper. And so I found this quote, I love it. I think it sums up the entire reason why that model fails in academia. The coolest thing to do with your data will be thought of by somebody else. When you keep a hold of it, you are not reaching the potential of all the work that you did taking that data. Or on our side, from someone in OATS, I can't remember if it was Jim, Dennis, or me, so I don't want to take credit, but Academia 2.0, what should be happening is we're publishing papers and code and data. When you see the algorithm in the paper, there should be a GitHub link where you can go download it and run it yourself against the same data set they ran it against. You get the same charts. Then suddenly when your graduate student has an awesome idea for how to extend that, he doesn't spend the first year of his tenure at Purdue figuring out how to recreate what that guy did from the vague paper. He starts with that and builds on top of it. And of course, even for students, there's some students in here, right? There's a business model of failure for students, which is just do your homework all 4 years and then graduate and hope somebody wants to hire you, right? What open source brings to this question is you can do real things. You can be a lot more awesome than just getting A's in class. Getting A's in class does not necessarily translate into getting A's in the real world. And so, if you're going to an interview as a student, or if you have somebody coming to you as a potential hire at the industrial roundtable, and you've seen like 50 students, here's my resume, all right, most of them got A's, great. But this guy says, hey, he got an A, but I built this. Here's my code. Here you can see my communication with my team members. You can figure out if I'm a jerk or not, right? It's all here. You can see what I actually do in the real world. So, what a lot of other people figured out was that was a business model of failure. Business model of success, a few of these companies might know. Google's here, right? Charlie, where? Back there. I didn't get Zuckerberg to come. I invited him, but he didn't. Android, Amazon, all of these companies build proprietary things on top of an open source internet. Okay? What they realized was that if we embrace the open source movement, we get better employees, we have better ideas, we innovate faster, we do more things. And Microsoft is stuck waging this war they don't have to war while we're out here innovating and completely changing the world. Would any of this have worked if Microsoft won? What Microsoft's vision was they would own the internet. Okay? That's the non-open source version. They are a vertical silo. What they could have said was Internet Explorer, our web browser, will only talk to our web server. That's it. It won't talk to the open source one. So stuff that gets put online with the open source one, nobody with IE can look at it. Right? They could have said that. But then you would have had Apple's internet, and you would have Sun's internet, and Microsoft's internet, and you wouldn't have had the internet. And that's the thing we missed in 1990. By giving away the right free stuff, we have bigger markets. We have much bigger markets. And that's the thing people found hard to understand, is that if you put open source out there in the right way, you have a huge market. And you can take 20% of a giant market, or you can take 100% of nothing. Take your choice. So the way that applies to ag, in my opinion, is that without open source, the ag data market is negligible. You cannot do any better than Microsoft's internet. They spent a heck of a lot more money than any of us ever will at trying to make that happen, and they finally, after 30 years, had to admit failure. The reason nobody's using data today is because there is no open source in ag. Nobody can innovate. All the ideas that are out there you can't execute on. If you don't get open source in ag, there will not be an ag data market, period. Everybody will talk about it for another 10 years, and eventually we'll get tired of it and it'll go away. So I wanted to start here with just some Lamentations. I tried to write it in acrostic poem like the actual book of Lamentations. Every paragraph starts with a successive letter of the alphabet, and then I realized I can't do that. So this is the ag edition of the book of Lamentations. First, people don't want to share their data. Anybody ever heard that in the ag industry? That's number one, right? Nobody wants to share their data. Nothing works together. Interoperability, I hear that word about every 30 seconds, I think, in every ag publication. That's every farmer's main lament about their data. So the people that make the tools say, well, farmers don't want to share their data. And the farmers say, well, nothing works together anyway, so what do I care? Another thing, and I've been making this point to a lot of the audience I speak at, I usually have a lot more slides leading up to it, but from a farmer's perspective, data has been the future for 25 years, okay? Back when we got our first yield maps back in 1992, okay, it was cool. Now it's old. We've got the yield maps, and we haven't been doing anything with them. The data's there, and we're starting to sort of, if you've ever been to one of these conferences with the farmers in there about what's the new technology coming, they all look bored and tired. Okay, they've seen the same stuff for 25 years. Another thing, anybody ever complain about ag data quality? It's like manure, it stinks. There's one reason that it stinks. And that's because nobody uses it. It doesn't have to be good. So if it doesn't have to be good, I won't spend any money, time, or effort on making it good, period. If I don't use it, it's not going to be any good. And lastly, it's hard to find good help. How do we find the data science people for agriculture? How do we convince CS folks to take an interest in agriculture? How do we hire these people at our companies? I see this as kind of the Lamentations book of ag, because it's repeated over and over and over again. And the point I want to leave you guys with today, I have more slides, don't worry, but I hope you take this one away, is open source done right can literally solve every one of these issues. The reason they're not solved is because we haven't done it yet. So I'm going to give you an example. People don't want to share their data? Open source brings trust and value to the marketplace. Open source gives you a way to have the conversation with your customer that says, look, I'm not the only one doing this. I'm not just taking your data so that I can sell it to other people. Open source gives you an end to that message to your customer that sets you on more of an equal footing. It also is the only way we're ever going to find this value. Too many people have too many ideas that don't get executed on, and since they can't execute, all that value that they have out there is just sitting out there, not being used. Nothing works together? Anybody here actually integrate with a few companies over an API or something like that, like real-time data? I got a couple. Okay, good. And so when you do that without open source, every company that has data that you want to integrate against is at least one engineer at your company. Okay? You've got to pay a guy to figure out how to integrate against their thing. And then you go to the company down the road, another soil test lab, and that soil test lab does the same thing the first one did, but they have a completely different API. So when you want to scale compatibility, you want to make it so I don't have to hire an engineer for every integration that goes on. If you don't have open source, you have to write all that code from scratch every time, and nothing from the first one applies to the second one. So you devote all your time to wrangling data, all your money to paying engineers to just do integrations and not doing cool stuff with the data. That's where the value lies, is what you do with it. Data's been the future for 25 years. The reason is all the great ideas people have, they can't execute on. There is too high of a barrier to entry to try. And so since there's too high of a barrier to entry, we have not democratized innovation. Open source democratizes innovation. It says if you have an idea, give it a try. If it works, it'll take off, and we'll buy your company, or we'll hire you at our company. And that's how we will own the market. Ag data quality is terrible. With open source, we can actually start to integrate a lot of the ideas from up here into changing from an industry that focused on hindsight, looking at what happened 6 months ago, and planning for next year, into one that makes data relevant in real time. If we don't make it relevant in real time, the data will be terrible, period. If I don't need it today, I won't take the time today to make it better, because there's 20 other fires going on at the farm that I got to take care of, and the fact that the sensor on the combine isn't working, I have case, so the sensors never fail, guys. Don't worry about it. But I'm going to just tape over the sensor, right? We're going to do something to get the combine running, because we've got to pick the crop. Data always loses in that scenario. And the last one is, it's hard to find good help. How great would it be if instead of just getting those report cards from kids, you actually could work with them on the products your company is working on while they're in college. And you can figure out long before you ever see them, these are the guys we want. This is how you find good help. You build better talent, A, because you get them working on problems of interest to you, and you find the talent faster, because the kids who rise to the top almost immediately in this kind of an environment. So I want to start with a few guiding principles here. Anybody know who Peter Drucker is? Father of modern business. You would not have ever heard the letters MBA if this guy did not live. He was the father of business consulting, modern business consulting. So I just saw this the other day. He said it long before that. But because the purpose of business is to create a customer, the business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results. All the rest are costs. That's what our center is focused on, marketing and innovation. We have got to figure out how do we tell the world that this is how we solve this problem, and we have got to figure out how do we innovate a heck of a lot faster than ag has been doing for the last 30 years. So I'm going to start with, anybody ever seen this slide? All right, then I don't. Pretty famous TED Talk a few years ago from a guy named Matt Ridley. I encourage you to go watch it. It's only 10 minutes, even shorter than my talk. But I thought he had a fantastic way of explaining why open source works, why open source brings you better innovation. The brown thing on the right, your left, I guess, my right, is a rock that he found from some Aboriginal tribe in an island somewhere. If it had been my story, I'd remember where that was. His story, it's a rock. The one on the right is a computer mouse. I just showed this to a group of undergrads on Tuesday this week, and I said, any of you ever even owned one of these? And there was not a hand that went up. That is now the 8-track of computing right there. And so He says, look at these two things. They weigh about the same. They're approximately the same size and shape, but there is one key difference between the two. If I gave you guys a rock that didn't look like that one, every one of you in this room, if I gave you enough time, you would figure out how to make it look like that one. There is not a single person in this room or in the entire world that knows how to build a computer mouse. And that's an old piece of technology. It's like 5 years old, right? What does it take to build a computer mouse? You've got to have oil that you can refine and turn into plastic. You've got to have a guy that's growing coffee in Colombia so the guy running the oil refinery equipment doesn't fall asleep. And you've got to have the person that knows how to refine the phosphorus and the boron and etch it on the silicon to make billions of transistors that go into tiny little chips. No one knows how to do that. No single person knows that. What free markets bring to the world and what open source accelerates is that innovation happens when ideas have sex. That is what the computer mouse represents. Lots of different people with lots of different different specializations. They're really good at one or two things, come together, and their ideas mix. The DNA splices together, and you end up with a lot more, better, faster ideas. So, anybody ever heard of the Lean Startup? Seen this book before? A few people. So this is kind of claimed as the reason the tech industry took off and transformed the world and disrupted everybody. That they had kind of figured out an explanation for this. I heard from a guy at Google, actually, Andres, I think Segoya was his name. He coined the term credotyping. If you've never seen it, Google credotyping, go look it up. But it's along the same lines of this Lean Startup thing, that if you look around the world, 70% of new businesses fail, right? 70% of the ideas that people have that they are willing to risk their money, time, and effort in doing fail. That means that at least 70% of the ideas in my head that I think are awesome are terrible. You've got to be willing to accept that you do not have the right answer as much as you think you do all the time. And the way you really innovate is you've got to figure out how to find the bad ideas faster than anybody else. You've got to be able to try and fail as fast and cheap as anybody in the world. And that's what this is about. This model of we're going to build something and we're going to build the smallest version of it, we're going to measure what happened, we're going to learn from that, and we're going to iterate again. We're not going to take a waterfall approach that we're just going to build the whole thing and send it out and we're done. We can go move to an island somewhere and retire. The reason that works, for those of us in ag that might understand this kind of stuff, why did that work so well? I mean, how many of these charts have you guys seen in like business books, right? There's been millions of these for years. There's Six Sigma, there's everything. Why did that work so well? Well, actually, nature shows us why that works so well. This is a description of evolution. This is how evolution comes up with new ideas. You have mutation. Mutation is your new idea. It's this thing that I really don't know if it's going to work or not. And I do want to point out, I want to thank Andres Sitnik from OCSS for giving me this insight. But mutation is, I have no idea, we're going to try it out. Measurement is selection. And one of the keys to innovating properly is you have got to have effective natural selection. Stuff that is a bad idea has to die, and it has to die fast. The example that he used of when this doesn't happen is the blink tag in HTML. Have you ever seen stuff blink on a web page? Nobody wants it, but it's enshrined in a standard forever, so everybody that writes browsers from here on out all have to write code to implement the blink tag, because it's there forever. That's an example of stuff that happens that can't die. If you can't get stuff to die that isn't a good idea, you cannot evolve. You're stuck here, and you can't move to the inheritance phase. The inheritance phase is we learn from what we did before. We try to make a better job. The bad stuff died, but we take the DNA, which in the open source world is code. The DNA is the instructions for what we did, and that feeds our next round of mutation. That feeds our next ideas that we're going to have. So the stuff that didn't work never gets tried again, and we're focused on making these things happen. So the reason open source won is because this is the way the world works, whether we like it or not. Software development, innovation is an evolutionary process, and open source brings you more mutations because you got a lot more people working on it. You have merit-based selection. People in open source usually don't even know each other. And so there's none of this office politics that, well, I don't want to tell that guy it's a bad idea, you know, he's hard on it. It's just, they won't use it. Limited reinvention. Because the thing's already there for you to use, why reinvent the wheel? You don't have to reinvent something because it's there. And fast parallelization. This now happens around the world in communities of people completely disconnected from each other. And so this little wheel is spinning faster and faster and faster with open source than it can in any other model. So, open source ideas, I thought about putting developers here, but I didn't. I just said ideas. Open source ideas have more sex across more cultures and more environments. That's it in a nutshell. That's why open source works. That's what Microsoft missed. That's why we have bigger markets, because we innovate better if we figure out how to leverage that power and build our value on top of it instead of fighting it all the time. And the converse of this is the proprietary-only business culture. We only talk to each other, we don't tell anybody else what we're doing, and we're trying to keep everything secret until it gets out there. That's like an inbred family, okay? You can't adapt to changing conditions, you can't get new ideas in. There is none of this great creative process of DNA splicing going on between these ideas. And one example, this just happened last week on our ISO Blue project. Refo Tours, this guy is awesome, in Turkey. Took our code and all our instructions for how to build a telematics unit, and he built one, and he designed this box, and he's sending us the CNC drawings for it. So we're going to put that up online. So now you'll be able to make this awesome box too. That's an example of, we aren't very good at that, I'll be honest. We're not very good at making enclosures, right? Yang did a great job of making the one we have, but he bought it from somebody else and sent it to somebody else to drill holes in it. This one looks fantastic. So anyways, that's just an example of this guy's halfway around the world. I don't know him, and he just did work for us for free that is available to everybody else. So for those of you that don't code, what does fast innovation look like? I think it's hard if you're not in this to really get a feel for what this means for programmers. So here's an example. This is a thing called the Node Package Manager, not the most exciting name in the world, NPM. This is a place that hosts open source libraries for JavaScript. Its sole purpose in life is when you have something you need to do, you go here and you look for the thing you're looking for, and then it will install that into your code base within seconds. So let's say we're looking for, in JavaScript, it's my job at our company to put like a date field. I need to print the date in our web page right here. Okay, so you think, well, it's a lot of work. Can I find a library that does this? So we go to NPM and we search for date. And this comes up. There's one called date at the top. Oh, that looks reasonable. Let's click on it. You click on it, it's got a bunch of stuff. If you're like me, you kind of don't read that at all. What you do is you go look over here. Stats. 365 downloads last month for this one. If somebody downloads 365 times my stuff, I think that's awesome. In NPM, that is basically his friends and neighbors. All right? So if only your buddies are downloading your library, it's probably not the best choice for me to embed in my enterprise software. If I click on the second one, Moment, 14 million downloads last month. 3.4 million this month. NPM solved the problem of how do you find quality open source projects and how do you get the bad ones to die fast. The minute a good one shows up, a bunch of disconnected people around the world, by virtue of using it in their project, vote on this is the awesome thing. This is the date library to use, and trust me, it is. It's much better than all this. And so then I just go back to my terminal, I type this one command, literally one command, and in half a second, I have that library available to use in my code. That is fast innovation. That was not having to talk to anybody. That is literally 2 minutes from knowing I needed a date library to I have a date library. And now I'm on with the rest of what I'm trying to get done. So here's an example. There's a poster over there about it. I made this on my farm. We had to start January 1 recording antibiotic treatments to our livestock. Every shot I give a cow, I need to record its ID and what we gave it. And so we were writing that down on a piece of paper, and since we never looked at the piece of paper, we didn't do a very good job of reading it. And so I made an app. I made an app to do that, where you can actually type in the over here the ear tag color and number, and it'll show you everybody you've given shots to today. These codes represent what they got. And if you type one in, you see the history of that calf, everything he's ever had. It's all real-time, live, connected to the cloud, and free, and open source. I wrote 1,400 lines of code to do this, and from concept to production, it was 20 hours for just me. Okay, not bad, about a long day, maybe 2 days. I looked when we wrote the FAR proposal here that helped create this day. I've never looked at this before. I had 296,000 lines of other people's code. I wrote 1,400 lines of mine. And in 20 hours, I used 296,000 lines from 764 other libraries that made this thing work. And it's been in production since February, working flawlessly across everybody in our farm. 20 hours. This would have taken at least 6 months without open source, maybe a year. That is fast innovation. None of these people, I can guarantee you, when they wrote any of these libraries, thought a livestock farmer would be using it to record cattle treatments. That is the ideas having sex, right? My idea is I need something for that. Their idea solve their problem. We put it together, and suddenly in 20 hours, we have an app that actually provides real business value on my farm. This saves me 3 man-hours a week. because before, when we were writing it on paper, it took way longer than doing it this way. And it also makes it so that when I have this calf come in, I know his history on the spot. I quit giving him the wrong antibiotic. Before, I would just keep giving him the antibiotic that I thought was good, because it cost more. Some of them like $30 a shot. And now, if that one didn't work last time, it's not going to work this time. And so I give him the right one. So how is this relevant to what we're talking about today? First thing, if you look at the tech world, in an evolving world with open source, first to market wins, okay? You aren't going to make the successor to Android and beat Google. They got there first. So the reason this is important now is we are bringing this to the ag market. It is coming, and it can innovate faster than any one company in this room. And if you don't embrace that, and you don't realize that the faster we hop on this and the faster we take advantage of it in our company, you will get left behind. So your choice is either wait to be dependent on your competitors' code that they're releasing open source, or you take the lead, the talent, and the market share. Because I can tell you where the developers want to go work, where the people with the awesome ideas want to go work, is the place where they have open source available to them. I saw a guy from Facebook, they released an open source library called React.js that I love. I saw the guy give the keynote on when they were releasing it, and he stood up there and said, I feel like Steve Jobs. This is awesome. Like, that guy is going to work at Facebook, forever. He loves that. That's what brings him there. And if he's got to go somewhere else and he can't tell anybody about what he's working on, he's not going to want to work there. So to wrap this up, bring it back to the center. What we're doing, why we're trying to help this happen, and why we think the model that we have is going to be successful. So the first thing that open source and the OATS Center in particular, I think, is going to enable in the industry. So enable meaning you can't do it any other way. You can't do it without this. The OATS Center is bringing first strategy. It is very difficult to strategize without some sort of central place that folks like yourselves are coming together to learn about open source. We're going to strategize today. We're going to have a meeting later where we're all going to strategize about some open source projects that we could do in the industry. Conversation. There are conversations that you can't have without open source, and we're trying to make as many of those happen as possible. Collaboration. If you try to work closely with another company, you get antitrust problems unless you're going to release all your stuff open source. And then the phrase I had read one time was, it's collusion without the collusion, right? That if you're working towards the public good, it's not the same as we're trying to collude against bringing prices higher for our companies. And then my favorite, the not invented here vaccine. You need a vaccine against that in a world where all these other ideas are out there mating, and you guys are saying, well, we didn't do that here, we're not going to use that. You're going to fall behind. This OATS Center, we're going to try to bring that stuff to you, to the members of the center. One key thing we're going to be providing is marketing. FAR gave us some explicit funding to do marketing. One of our big goals, if we're going to have industry people be members of the center, we want to make sure you can take that to your customers and have a clear marketing message that can help give you an advantage in the marketplace. And so we're going to help craft that message. And in fact, Mark Tucker over here he's our Chief Marketing Officer. So he's going to make it happen, I hope. But no, we're all engaged here, and that's one of the key missions. Education is another big one. In true open source fashion, we're going to be putting together educational materials, modules, things like that that are open source that we can come present at member companies, that we can have member companies come and see at the university, that they can interact with our students who are all working on these projects together. And of course, the most important thing that we do at the university is research. We've got a lot of really smart people that are going to be a part of this center. And I think there's some really great opportunities for research on the horizon here, that if you marry open source to it, you suddenly have distribution and innovation all at the same time. And then the last one that we've got is build. What are we going to make? So we provide this. What are we going to make? First, our core thing is projects. We like to make real stuff. We like to make real stuff that works and take videos of it working and show the world. Right? That's what we're after.